Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Cathcart. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni and Family Relations at California Lutheran University. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat box located in the Zoom menu on your screen. We will have dedicated time with Jim at the end of the presentation for Q&A. When you join the meeting, your video was off and your microphone was muted. Please do not change these settings during the presentation to help us avoid any excess noise or disruptions. And lastly, this presentation is being recorded, so it will be posted on our website for your reference after today. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for this morning. Jim Cathcart is an entrepreneur in residence and EMBA faculty professor at CLU. He is one of the world's most award-winning professionals, speakers, and the author of 20 books, including 3 international bestsellers. As a veteran of over 3,300 paid speaking engagements all over the world, including recent trips to 21 cities over China, Jim is uniquely qualified to show us insights into achievement and motivation strategies that will work across all disciplines and age groups. Jim's own life is an example of what he teaches. He is a mountain trail runner, a professional singer-songwriter, a life member of the American Motorcyclists Association, a civil leader, and a husband of Paul Cartwright for over 50 years. His family and health show that joyful, productive living can make a powerful difference. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Stephen, and good morning. Welcome, everybody. Or if you're on the East Coast, good afternoon. It's great to be with all of you, and I appreciate this privilege. I really do want to chat with you, so use that chat room and drop the notes or comments in there. If it's something I need to read or see, during the program, then please put it in there. I've already preloaded the chat room with some items that I think you'll want to keep, so you may want to print that out or sketch it down or something. I just put some prompts that relate to rethinking. When you think about anything, everybody knows how to think, but not many of us, as a matter of fact, darn few of us, have been taught how to think well. So when we make choices based on our habit patterns, based on our instincts, based on the way we've always done things, or based on the way we're hoping to do things. But that's not always the best choice. Many years ago, I had the privilege of working with a man named Spencer Johnson. Spencer Johnson's best known for 2 of his books. He wrote many books. One was The 1 Minute Manager, which he co-authored with Ken Blanchard, another friend and colleague of mine. And the other one was Who Moved My Cheese? And that one became a huge, huge hit. And it was all about adapting to change. Well, during that time frame between the 1 Minute Manager and Who Moved My Cheese publication, he wrote a book called Yes or No, The Guide to Better Decisions. And since I knew him, I was at his home in Hawaii one time, and he said, "Hey, I'm writing a new book. I'd like you to see it and give me your thoughts on it." So he gave me a rough manuscript, and I read the book. And my wife and I were there in Hawaii together. And so I read it over the next few days. And I called him from another island where we were at a resort where I was giving a speech. And I said, "Hey, I have some thoughts and observations on your book." And I started sharing those with him. And he said, "Wow." He said, "This is great stuff." He said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming and spending a week with me at my home here on the North Shore of Oahu?" Well, I said, "Sure." He said, "I'd love to collaborate with you on this book." So I lived in San Diego at the time. Now I live in Thousand Oaks. And I flew to Hawaii again later and spent a week at his home. And every day we would work on the manuscript, and then we would call our literary agent, Margaret McBride, who was in La Jolla, and we would talk with her about the changes in the book. She was my agent for relationship selling. She was his agent for his books. Anyway, the book finally came out, and didn't do nearly as well in the marketplace as his other books, but it's a solid, good book with really great information in it. And it boils down to teaching people how to make better decisions. And he divides it simply into two parts: personal decision, what's right for you, and practical decision, what's right under the circumstances. And then he divides that into subparts. Well, I'd recommend that you get a copy of the book. It's an easy, quick read. It's a parable like the 1 Minute Manager and the Who Moved My Cheese book. So it's fun to read, and it's something you could read aloud with your family or your spouse or with the kids, and discuss the items in it, because it talks about decision making from this perspective. It says, first off, do you have all the information you need? Are you really looking at this in the right way? Using the Chinese character for crisis, the two characters, danger and opportunity, wei ji, which is dangerous opportunity or crisis. Well, looking at that, when you're making a decision in a crisis like we are, well, are you working with full information, or are you only getting one point of view? When you tune into the news day to day, are you just watching one channel, or are you surfing from time to time and getting different perspectives? When you're online, do you go to one source, or do you get input from a variety of sources and ask, why do they disagree? What's that about? Because most of us tend to, we put our filter on the world. Our filter's our point of view based on our beliefs, our standards, our experience, our assumptions about what is so. And we see the world through that filter. Well, if that filter's purple, as in the case of Cal Lutheran, then everything out there looks kind of purple. But if you remove that filter, you might see a whole rainbow of different colors, and you may choose that purple's the one you want to embrace once again. But how are you going to know unless you're looking without filters occasionally, or through other people's filters? So decision-making can only be done really well when you're sure that you're getting a full exposure to all the various perspectives. So I'm going to walk you through just a few thoughts on all of this. Let's first acknowledge that in this scenario that we're in with, pretty much a worldwide shutdown, everybody and their brother and sister is quarantined in one way or another. Even the places that aren't fully under quarantine orders are definitely reducing all of their activities, and life is not usual at all. Okay. So how do people react to situations like that? Well, they react predictably. They do. First reaction is fight or flight. In other words, you deal with it, try to make it go away, make it better, or do you run from it, hide from it, or just, withdraw into your hole and build up your fortifications to keep it from knowing you're there? Well, a combination of the two usually, but it's important to know that's our natural response. And our stress adaptation tends to follow our natural patterns. In other words, if I knew you, if I had observed you over a period of time, I could probably predict how you're going to react to stress or crisis or danger. And you could do the same for me, because we show the world through our patterns who we are. Now, there are lots of patterns that make us who we are. I wrote a book called The Acorn Principle that spends a great deal of time exploring all of those dimensions to show people a self-guided tour of themselves, what makes them who they are. And one thing that makes us who we are is our thinking, the ways of thinking. There are multiple ways of being smart, multiple types of intelligence. Howard Gardner's the best known authority in that field, but there's Robert Sternberg and a whole host of other people, Thomas Armstrong, who have written about multiple intelligences, different ways of being smart, like there's musical smarts, mathematical smarts, interpersonal smarts, self-awareness smarts, visual smarts, all kinds of ways to be smart. And we're all capable of all of those. But most of us have only really developed a few of them well, and the others are just marginal by comparison. So it's important to know in what ways are you smart, because that tells you what you can do well already, but it also tells you where your blind spots probably are. And blind spots are a big deal in a situation like this. See, when we're thinking about thinking or rethinking our decisions, it's not enough to just go with what's available right now. We need to step outside our own perspective. We need to see things through different points of view. So one thing is to explore, how are we smart and what blind spots do we have? If you want more on that, go to the ACORN principle. I'm not going to change today's program to be just about that. Another thing is to know, what is your intellectual bandwidth? In other words, how much information can you process efficiently in a given period of time? The population is pretty much divided into three general bandwidths. Operational bandwidth, which is better part of 80% of the population. And that means those people look at the world and they say, what you see is what you get. Show them a pen, ballpoint pen. You say, tell me about that. And they say, it's a pen. Yeah, but tell me more about it. Well, it's a purple plastic ballpoint pen. All right, tell me more about it. Well, the ink is also purple and it clicks instead of twisting. Okay, in other words, what you see is what you get. Most people, when they look at a situation, they only look at the situation. They don't think it through. They don't think, what does that mean? I wonder where that came from. What's the underlying assumption here? How does that fit with how I see things and what I believe? How does that make me feel? Wonder why I feel that way. In other words, there are lots of dimensions to explore, but most people just look at, it is what it is, that's it, right? Well, luckily, most of the work in the world, most of the duties and tasks in the world are operational duties and tasks. Move this to there, take this apart and put that back together. Fix this, repair that, share this, write this down, get dressed, comb your hair, etc. Most tasks in the world are operational tasks, and most people are quite well suited to that. Now, if you are of operational bandwidth, you can process most any information on Earth sooner or later, but not necessarily quickly. Now, about 18%, in other words, let me go back. So that means you could learn anything you need to learn. You just wouldn't necessarily learn it as fast as someone who had a broader bandwidth. Someone with strategic bandwidth, that'd be about 18% of the world, they tend to see things and think of uses. So instead of just looking at this as a pen and thinking of it as something to write with or mark with, they say, well, this could be business jewelry. If you want to put it in your pocket or wear it in some way, then that's a form of decoration, kind of identifies who you are, what you think about, what you care about, who you're with, right? They could say you could use it to scratch your ear or prop open a window. They think of lots of uses for it. Well, that's strategic bandwidth. And most of those people tend to graduate to the jobs or gravitate toward the jobs that require more problem solving, more analysis, more reflecting before decision making, management, leadership, sales, things like that, planning, designing, and so forth. And then about 2% of the population tend to be what I call conceptual thinkers. Conceptual thinkers, this is not just a style of thinking, it's bandwidth, processing capacity. Conceptual means you could probably juggle 5 or 6 subjects at one time and be fairly efficient in dealing with each one of them because you've got that processing capacity. And someone with conceptual bandwidth tends to look at something, let's say, as simple as this pen, and they say, you know what, that's actually, if you think about it, that's a symbol of humanity's ability to transcend space and time. And someone else would say, what? They say, yeah, I mean, it's a simple tool, but it didn't start out this way. I mean, plastic doesn't grow. So you can't go get plastic. You have to make plastic from other things. And ink isn't in the world in that form either. So you have to go through a whole lot of other processes just to get to creating something as simple as a plastic ballpoint pen. So you can transcend, say, space and time. They say, what? They say, yeah, think about it. This will make marks that have meaning. And as if someone else knows what that meaning is, like if you're writing in English or in Chinese or in whatever it happens to be, then other people can interpret those markings no matter how many years later, no matter where on earth they are or under what circumstances, and still gain meaning from words you wrote or symbols you made 20, 30 years ago. So a big part of decision making is bandwidth. But here's kind of the core of decision making that I want you to remember. The 7 natural values. A value is something that someone cares about. They place value on it. It matters to them, okay? There are 7 natural values, many values that we've learned from other people, but there are also natural values. And a natural value is a value that's just intrinsic. It's part of who you are, okay? The 7 natural values are best remembered, and I put this in the notes, by the way, using the acronym SEWPACK, SEWPACK. Think of a little sewing kit with 7 colors of thread in it and a needle, a little sewing pack like you would get in a hotel if you were getting an amenity kit as part of the bathroom equipment, you know, soap, shampoo, sewing kit. SEWPACK, SEWPACK, S, sensuality, E, empathy, and this is in the notes, P, or W, wealth, P, power, A, aesthetics, C, commitment, K, knowledge. These are values all of us have. Now, your values and my values are exactly the same as far as their nature, but not exactly the same when it comes to their quantity or power. For example, sensuality is the relative importance of your physical experience, not sexuality, although that's a subheading under it, but sensuality, your senses. The value of that to you, the importance of that to you, determines to a large extent how you make many of your choices. For example, my wife, Paula, has a high sensuality value. My sensuality value is lower than hers. If we're going to the movie, I'll say, hey, let's go to the movie. There's something over at Movie Co. that I want to go see. And she'll say, well, let's not go there. Let's go to Jan's Mall. Why? Because Jan's Mall has Diet Coke and Movie Co. has Diet Pepsi. That's not the case anymore, by the way, but that used to be the case. And I would say, well, but it's not about the cola, it's about the movie. Well, maybe it is for me, but for her, a big portion of an experience is the physical side of the experience. And for her, the taste difference between a Coke and a Pepsi is huge. For her, the way the cup feels in her hand and the edge of it feels when she's drinking from it actually matters. See, a person with a high sensuality value will choose their clothing more based on how it feels than how it looks or what it is. A person with a high sensuality value will judge you more on the quality of your handshake than, let's say, your eye contact or your credentials. So sensuality means physical experience. And if someone has a high sensuality value, then when they see something that they're thinking about buying, they say, let me touch it. Let me get a feel for it. They're kind of like the kinesthetic in neurolinguistic programming. People talk in terms and act in terms of touch and physical experience. E is empathy, the relative importance of feeling connected with other people. Someone with a high empathy value makes their decisions to a large extent based on how it's going to affect other people and how it's going to affect their experience with other people. The wealth value has to do with the ownership of things that have tangible worth. So someone with a high wealth value is absolutely directly money motivated. I'm not. I have a low wealth value, but I am very motivated by what money will do. Having money does nothing for me emotionally, but having the things money will buy, that turns me on a lot, right? If it buys me access, buys me an experience, but gives me an opportunity, buys me a thing, whatever it happens to be, that I can get excited about. But money itself, not so much. I have a good friend who every morning he gets up, goes to his computer before his cup of coffee and logs into his bank account and looks at the income and the expenses from the day before, does this posting of various expenses and income items, and then goes and gets his morning coffee. For him, the wealth value is very, very high, and not surprisingly, he has become quite wealthy over the years. Someone with a high power value, now power is the relative importance of control and recognition. So there's two dimensions to power. One is the power you are perceived to have, and the other is the power you actually have. So someone with a high power value would consider it important to be included in the VIP list, to get backstage access, to have an insider's privilege or something like that. I have a brother-in-law who has a high power value, and I said, Sam, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be? He said, I don't know, running something. So for him, being the person who gets to make the choices, the decisions, the one who's in charge, that's a big deal, right? So for someone like that, they make different choices than a person with a low power value. Like, for example, again, my wife, Paula, her power value is virtually zero compared to the others. And she's not concerned about all that as much as she is concerned about the other things. The aesthetics value is the relative importance of beauty, balance, symmetry, blend, patterns, textures, things like that. It's all about the way things look, the way things fit together, the neatness, the organization of things. Someone with a high aesthetic value, their office is neat as a pin. Someone with a low aesthetic value, they may have chaos, but they know where things generally are, right? So for someone with a high aesthetic value, they appreciate a painting for the way it looks and the way it fits into the decor. Someone with a high wealth value sees that painting and says, wonder what it's worth in the market today. Someone with a high power value says, oh, you've got a Picasso. Wow, you must be important, right? So it's different ways of perceiving different things. And the C, the commitment value, that's the relative importance of doing what matters to you, doing something that makes a difference, having a cause, championing some grand experiment, or doing something that's going to leave a mark, make a difference, do the right thing. High commitment value. So that's a vital value, and we all have it. But for some people, it's very high, and it kind of defines their whole life. For other people, it's not so much, and they'll do that when they get around to it. And the final value is knowledge, and that's the importance of learning, knowing, discovering, and understanding. Someone with a high knowledge value loves to learn. If you give them a book, they think, oh, you love me? A book? What a wonderful gift, right? Give that to someone with a low knowledge value, and they think, what, they didn't have neckties or sweaters? Or just give me the money, right? Depending on their values. So if we know our bandwidth, we know how we're smart, we know our values, our value priorities, which ones are the top 2 or 3, we can make much, much better decisions in life. So that's a big part of rethinking is know thyself. Know yourself. Spend some time reflecting and thinking about who you are, how are you put together, what makes you who you are, and then begin your decision making. See, there's a practical decision. This works under the circumstances. And there's a personal decision. This feels right to me. And it's going to work for me, not just under the circumstances. And you've got to blend those two. And if one of them's in conflict with the other one, you need to say, maybe I should re-examine my decisions. Maybe I should make my choices in a different pattern. Okay, so here we are forced into an opportunity. We are put in a position where we've got a blessing of epic proportions that never in our lifetime has any of our peers been given such an opportunity to rethink. Because people are laid off from work and they've got a new choice. When things open up again, am I going to go back to work there? Maybe that's your best path. Maybe that's a good short-term path. Maybe that's not going to be available anymore. Who knows how much things will change. But when you go looking for the next thing for you, if you want to readopt the patterns of the past, if you want to put the old coat back on because it feels right for you, do it. Do what works for you. Do what's consistent with your values, your beliefs, your priorities, the commitments you've made. Do what works for you. But remember to think beyond it. There's thinking about things. That's very helpful. But thinking through things is even more helpful. And if we don't think things through, we end up in a whole lot of short-term trips in our life, little journey down to the end of the cul-de-sac and then turn around and start the journey over again. I think every cul-de-sac ought to lead to a new gateway, which leads to a new highway, which leads to new opportunities, instead of go down this one, turn around and come back and start over. And that's the big opportunity. That's the blessing in all of this right now. Man, there's so much to talk about. As a matter of fact, let me give you a personal example of how I'm doing this on my own. I am a professional speaker and author. I have been for 43 years. I know, that's an entire generation plus. Well, I still love it. I'm healthy and fit. I feel young, even though my body's 73 years old. I'm still doing 100 push-ups a day, every day, literally every day. And I've done that since October 23rd of 2016 and haven't missed a day yet, even when I was ill. Although when I was ill, I was doing 10 or 20 at a time and then resting between. Now I tend to try to do them straight through as much as possible. I run mountain trails 3 days a week, 6 miles round trip at sunrise with a group of friends. I did that yesterday morning, although we stayed a lot further apart yesterday. So I still feel young physically. I still feel young emotionally and intellectually. So I'm looking for ways to expand my life, not contract it. People ask me, when are you going to retire? I say, I'll tell you what, you can come to my retirement party. They might call it a funeral, but don't be fooled. It's my retirement party. Because as long as my mind is working and my voice is working and I'm able to do things that give value to other people, I want to keep on doing it because that's what keeps me alive. You see, the goal of every living entity, every cell and every organism built of those cells, the goal of it, the intrinsic goal, is to live fully, to thrive, to expand, to grow, to eat, to reproduce, to do whatever that organism is designed to do. So we are designed to stay alive, That's why the traditional concept of retirement is kind of a dysfunctional concept anymore. It used to be that life was really, really hard. People had to physically struggle just to survive and make it through life. No wonder they wanted to rest and retire when they got older. Well, it's not as physically hard anymore. As a matter of fact, we make it harder intentionally and joyfully by choosing to exercise. Good. Good on you. We choose to exert. We choose to face difficulty and even increase resistance to increase our strength through exercise. Well, great. Do that intellectually as well. Do that interpersonally as well. Become better and better and better and better at understanding other people. Become a better listener. Listening is not gathering data. Listening is getting it, what that other person's trying to express. Listening, as one child once said, is wanting to hear. Ain't that the truth? See, a lot of people hear data, but they don't hear the feeling or meaning behind the data, or nor do they empathize and try to understand why the person would be concerned about that. And there are patterns that we have in the way we listen that could be vastly improved, and it would get us more information just by expanding the ways in which we listen. I love the fact that I have specialized now for more than 40 years in the field of human development. I've focused on learning what traditionally was called soft skills, like listening and communication and presentation and public speaking and sales and leadership and motivation, all of which is applied behavioral science, basically. But I love the fact that that's been my specialty because it gives me so many possibilities to help people. And it's made my own life a whole lot more joyful. Although there have been those moments where I've had to stop and face cold reality that I was the one who was being a jerk. And I needed to readjust me before moving on to the next item. So what I teach people when I do an 8-week long group mentoring where I enroll people in the mentoring group, small group, and I lead them through a process once a week of rethinking various aspects of their life and becoming better and better at certain things. But one of the things I teach people is how to be creative. And I'm going to show you, I put in your notes, how to use creative prompts to change your perspective and expand your mind to let different information in. And I learned this years ago, and it's been super, super helpful in consulting, in coaching, in teaching and leadership. It's just been a really good way to look at things. And by the way, I want to ask you now, would all of you that are on this call please type a yes in the chat room right now? Just type in yes and hit enter. Yes, 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 yes. I love that. Okay, now I'll ask the question. I accept your answer, by the way. No, I'm joking. I'm not trying to rope you into something. I just wanted to get you engaged with the chat function so that we can talk about this. I need someone to present to me a scenario that we can think about creatively. And I'll give you an example so that you can determine what you want to type in there as a suggestion, and I'll choose one of your suggestions. The other day, I was talking with my son who's in the hotel business, luxury hotel business. And I said, I've been thinking about your business and the fact that you've laid off your hundreds of employees recently, and that this is a time of, I don't know, time of going into neutral gear, park maybe, for everybody. So a time of non-engagement. I've been thinking, how would I, if I were in your position as a leader in a hotel, how would I keep the people engaged? And I started thinking, what could I combine? What could I reverse? What could I adapt? How could I increase or decrease something? How could I put things to a new use? Whatever. And then I thought, here, you have a dozen or more managers of departments. Each of those people have a dozen or more employees throughout the whole property. How do you get them engaged and keep them engaged when you're not even paying them? Well, everyone's forced pretty much to stay out of the marketplace right now. So they've got a little bit of free time. If you assume that the likelihood is you will re-engage, rehire those people at the end of this passage, then one thing all of us could do is, whether that's going to happen or not, let's bet on the fact that it might. All right. So let's assume that the job will be there once again. Well, in a hotel housekeeping department, who knows the most about housekeeping procedures? The housekeepers, not the manager, but the individual housekeepers. They know what it feels like, looks like, and what works and doesn't work in assembling their materials and loading up the cart in the morning, and then going to their assigned floor, and then they know what order they're going to address the rooms. They know how they're going to approach each room. When they open the door, they know what they're going to do first, second, third, fourth, and 20th, right? In other words, nobody knows how to make that process better than they do. So have your managers once a week hold a little video call or an audio call if your people are uncomfortable with that, and take one aspect of the job, like maybe the first couple of minutes of each phase of the work, and have the entire group talk about what bothers them, what works for them, what would make it easier in the first 2 minutes of that portion of the job. And then you record all those ideas, and then the managers meet once a week online and share the task improvements that came out of their group that week. And then you find some way to reward the people for participating, either emotionally reward them, financially reward them, somehow reward them for being engaged in it. And by the time everybody gets back to work at the end of the passage, every task in the hotel from top to bottom will have been improved in many ways that make it more enjoyable for the worker, with a better outcome even for the guests who stay there. So that's what I mean by rethinking. So think about an industry that you're involved in or a profession you're involved in, and let's take that as our example and do some creative thinking right now about how to make it better. What are some ideas? And I'll take a field of endeavor and we'll choose a word or two to apply to it. And then I'll go to another one. So if you've got one, please type it in the chat room right now. And hit enter, please. Okay, I'm going to take the first one that comes to my mind, and that is distance learning. Meeting online and learning new things. Right now, as a professional speaker, having been one for all these years, I have had to rethink my entire craft. It's like I did on 9/11 when all conventions in the nation and all travel was canceled. I was immediately out of business and all my engagements were canceled or postponed a long time because we didn't know if we were in World War III or what. All we knew was nothing was working. So I said, okay, let's assume for a minute it's a national emergency at the level of World War II, and it no longer matters what I'm doing for a living. What matters is what we do to survive as a nation. So if nobody can travel, what could be done? And what do I know? What can I bring to the table to help the world be a better place, help my country survive? So I said, well, I can teach people how to get things done. I can teach ground level leadership. And I can teach that to people with no formal training going into it. To plan, organize, find resources, motivate volunteers, get other people engaged, and so forth. So what can I do? Well, if nobody's traveling, I have to do that within walking distance of where I am, or bicycling distance, right? Because maybe petroleum can't travel either, and we'll end up running out of gas. So what can I do? So I thought about what I could do right here along the 101 highway, the 101 corridor between Topanga Canyon on one end and Carpinteria on the other end, just the other side of Ventura. And I did my research and I realized there were 12 major communities along that corridor with a total population at the time of about 700,000 people. And in those 12 communities, they all had the same basic infrastructure. They had school systems and school boards. They had city councils, mayors, things like that. They all had all of the usual structure. And they had many, many volunteer organizations throughout the corridor as well. So what if we all got together and agreed to join hands and pool our resources to teach everybody in this region how to be better at getting anything that they needed done. So I formed the 101 Highway 101 Leaders Alliance. And I got the leaders of the Reagan Library, Cal Lutheran University School of Management, the dean at the time, Chuck Maxey. I got the dean of the Grazia Dio School at Pepperdine University. I got Marty De Los Cobos, who was vice president of university advancement for Cal State Channel Islands. The Ventura County Sheriff, the head of the Ventura County Community Foundation, the head of the Boys and Girls Clubs, Cal Johnston at the time, and a number of other people. And I brought them together at Sherwood Country Club, which was where I was living. And we held a summit and we talked about sharing our resources to help cultivate ground level leadership. And I put together a major summit where we invited hundreds of people to come to a meeting where all of us were sharing our expertise and telling about our resources and teaching people basic skills. And NBC News came out and covered it, and it was a big deal, and we got a lot going. And then I hosted a series of seminars, and society normalized again after 9/11. And so that series of seminars was able to expand, and I was able to fly in many of my friends who are best-selling authors and experts and philosophers and scientists and other people like that, and use them as the featured guest in a series of training programs for the 101 Leaders Alliance. And I was no longer a professional speaker primarily. I was the head of the 101 Leaders Alliance, bringing in other speakers and facilitating the learning. Well, now I'm doing it again, reinventing myself. Paula joked last night when talking with my son. He said, "Where's Dad?" She said, "He's downstairs in his office reinventing himself." And I am. I'm spending a lot of time each day learning and looking at what other people are doing. And the rest of the time I'm spending focusing on developing my group mentoring program and my ability to do it even better. So I encourage you to take these prompts, combine, separate, reverse, increase, etc. Look at those, you find them in the chat, and apply them to your business or industry or your particular personal career or life. And just say, okay, what could I do a whole lot more of and make things better? All right, what could I do less of or none of and free up more time? How could I change the timing of this, not do it as often, or do it more often, or do it later, or do it never? How could I make this more private? In other words, do what I do directly for individuals. How could I do this more publicly? Do what I do in a bigger forum and reach more people? How can I address the emotional needs of people, the way they feel, reduce their fears, increase their confidence? How can I address the pragmatic needs of people, show them the dollar opportunities, teach them solutions, show them how to processes? How can I adapt what I've been doing to a whole new application or use to change the way things are done. For example, Uber came from that. Someone said, okay, let's take the concept of taxis and let's say, where are cars already with drivers in them that could be used? Oh, how would that work? Don't know. Let's figure it out. So Uber came about. Then they said, well, if that works for cars, how about houses? Airbnb, right? Existing houses that had extra space that people might want to rent or lease. Okay, so look at your world that way. Think about rethinking what you're already following and what's already in place as your standard habit pattern. Stephen, let me ask a question. How much time do we have remaining in this?
We have about 8 minutes left.
About 8 minutes left.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if we want to open it up to questions at this point, I want to make sure that there's enough
Absolutely.
time.
We're wide open for questions now. You can ask the question in person by unmuting yourself, or you can ask it through the chat room by just typing it in. Next week, coping during coronavirus. Well, actually, that's this week too, isn't it? Because a lot of what we're talking about is what Beth Turner will be addressing next week, but I'll bet we're addressing it in a different way here today.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's next week's presentation. I won't step on yours right now, but absolutely,
Yeah.
that'll be more about stress and anxiety coping during this time. So,
yep. By the way, if everybody will go to their chat function, right along the bottom, there's a thing that says chat, and you click on that, and it opens up this panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can see that chat panel. Well, if you scroll all the way to the top of it to 8 minutes before we even began the program, I typed in a number of resource notes for you. Weiji, Chinese for crisis, that's the first thing. But then it's opportunity, creativity prompts. And I've got all those combine, separate, reverse, increase, etc. there for you. And then the yes or no book, I've got the ISBN number if you want to order the book. It's a good book. And then my book, The Acorn Principle, which has the 7 natural values in it. That's also got the ISBN number, although I said SIBN when I typed it. And I also put, a bend in the road is only fatal if you refuse to turn. That's a quote from my friend David Newman. And then I typed in another question. Says who, based on what, and is that true for me? Those are questions we need to be posing in our own world as we think day to day about these things. By the way, this is obviously being recorded. Stephen, how will this be shared so that people can pass this along to someone else or review it again later?
Absolutely, great question, Jim. So everyone on this webinar will get an email later today or tomorrow with the recording of this webinar. It's also posted on our Connecting Through Social Distancing webinar series website through the Alumni and Family Relations webpage. We have an archive of all of our past webinars, and that will include this one as well.
Good. Well, I hope everybody will take this opportunity to think through your daily routines, look at what you do every day and how you do it, and just say, is there a better way? Am I a horse following the same old worn path? Or can I create my own path and find a better way to improve some little aspect of this? Another thing is look at your attitudes. Your attitudes are not fixed. They're not concrete. They were adopted by you based on something that you felt at the time was the right way to do it. Is there a better way of thinking about what you think? Is there your assumptions about yourself, what you're capable of, what you're not, what you're good at, not good at, what kind of person you are? Are those assumptions really valid? Take a look at the Acorn Principle and explore. I think you'll find that a lot of those attitudes are up for renewal time and maybe rejection time. Uh, Revisit your goals and dreams. What matters to you? What do you care about? When you come out of this on the other side, what do you want to start making true? What dreams do you want to come true for you once life is back to some reasonable facsimile of what we used to call normal, right? What standards are you going to live by? For example, right now, if you see me visually, you can see I've got on a coat and tie. Well, I'm at home. Most people at home don't put on a coat and tie when they're doing a webinar or a Zoom meeting. Why did I do it? It's just, it's part of the message of me. You know, if I'm on the air in a t-shirt and my hair messed up and a few days growth of beard, that sends a very different message about how I'm regarding this role I have as a leader. And I need to be more conscious of the impression I'm sending. So I'm keeping my standards high. I'm keeping my fitness and my daily routines controlled within reason, where I can still relax, but I'm not losing the discipline and atrophying the portions of my life that need to be re-strengthened once I'm back in the marketplace. And think about what you want to know, what you want to have mastered, and what you want to be better at when you get out of all this. Find some time, make time every day right now, even if it's only 15 minutes, to get better at something. My friend Peter Vidmar won the Olympic gold medal in gymnastics years ago in Los Angeles. And I was talking with him about that one day, and I said, how did you know, clearly you're one of the best in the world, and were judged that year to be the best in the entire world in your field. How did you do it? Because there are lots of other really, really good people you're competing against. He said, I always showed up 15 minutes earlier and left 15 minutes later than the other athletes. He said, Jim, those 15 minutes made all the difference in whether I was going to compete or win a medal or win the gold medal. He said, the difference between Olympian and Olympic champion is huge, and it's those extra 15 minutes. So what are you personally spending 15 minutes becoming better at during this crisis? I think that's vital. And then what do you want to avoid in the future that you've always had to deal with in the past? Find a way around it, through it, or just make it obsolete. Like my friend Daniel Burris is a futurist, a technological researcher and a futurist. He says, take your biggest problem and skip it. Just look for a way around it. Don't mess with that problem anymore. Make a different challenge available and do something else. Well, sometimes we can't do that, but when we can, we certainly should. So, you know, I give you that advice from my friend Dan. I've got a comment here. Great information. Thank you very much, Citrus Valley.
Yeah, there's a lot of thank yous in the chat box, Jim. So
yeah.
that was
and by the way,
a great presentation.
By the way, one quick
Yes.
comment regarding real estate industry. I've listed my own home, and my wife and I are currently looking at new possibilities for us, but we're making new life decisions, not just shrinking down because we're older now, but looking at quality of life decisions. What's going to have the social possibilities, the all of the other things that make our life richer and more abundant. We're not committed to selling, but we're looking at it and dancing with that right now, even in the middle of all this. So think about the next phase of your life, because it's coming and it'll be here any day. How do you want to make that part of your life better, more satisfying, more meaningful, and make more of a difference for the rest of the world? Folks, I really appreciate you being here today. And those of you watching this afterwards, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I want to help you make your life better in any way that I can. So God bless you, and best of all things to you.
Thank you, Jim. I want to echo that back to you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share with us. I think there were some really meaningful and important takeaways that you shared today, and some good items of reflection that we can all be thinking about during this time. I do want to just address one question that's come up a couple of times in the
Okay.
chat. That the items that were posted prior to the start of the webinar, Jim, a couple of the books that you referenced and everything, might not have been available to everyone to see. So me and Jim, I'll get the information from you and make sure that that's all in the follow-up email to everyone
Okay.
later. That way you can all reference the books and the notes that Jim has talked about during this webinar.
I'm copying it right now. I'm going to paste it in there again.
Oh, perfect. There you go.
Okay.
And then we can share the transcript of the notes
Yeah.
with everyone as
Yeah.
well. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today.
There you go. I
Thank you.
just did it.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. So there's all the notes available. Again, we'll share that transcript of the notes as well.
Thank you.
So a huge thank you to Jim. Again, next week, Dr. Beth Turner presenting on coping during the coronavirus, presentation focused on stress and anxiety during this time. So to everyone, thank you for joining us. Stay healthy and stay safe.